hi there, person who has allowed my voice to permeate your peace. It is me, Josh Bloom, the host of this podcast. I hope that you have made your way through the 4-episode drop of the all-new 1,461 Days of Ignoring with Josh Bloom series and are now ready for more. Remember that song? More. It came out of the disco era in 1976 and was sung by Andrea True, whom I had never heard of until approximately 18 seconds before typing her name just now. This podcast is indeed the weekly compilation of my daily 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump administration posts, which I officially titled 1,461 Days of Ignoring with Josh Bloom because I was sick of seeing my face next to his name. I am not at the P, I am at the M. The M stands for mall, and this particular mall is the JV Mall, which stands for Jefferson Valley Mall, the mall that I mentioned in episode 60 of the Josh Bloom podcast as the mall containing the Dick's sporting goods that I made out in front of. It is the mall that my parents did not want built, and which I subsequently ended up working at in the Walden Books, which does not exist anymore. Be sure to follow the Josh Bloom podcast for stories like these. The reason I am here at the mall is because I am a mall walker. That's right, I cannot go to the snow-covered local track in single-digit temperatures, and so in order to get some kind of movement happening, I come to this mall to do mall walking. It is interesting, as a 54-year-old man who worked here when I was 16, to see that so much is the same, but so much is not the same. When a mall is in decline, it is not a good time. It causes you to reflect on the life you once partially lived in the mall and the life you left behind, which you are now revisiting by being in the mall again. I need to take this opportunity to correct a mistake I made in the aforementioned episode 60 of the Josh Bloom podcast, where I asserted that a mall must be judged by the quality of its food court. In the episode, I claimed this food court was quote-unquote straight garbage. I apologize. When I visited here recently, as I have been doing because of the snow-covered track and the single-digit temperatures, I walked through the food court, of course, but I did not walk through a food court that was straight garbage. I walked through a food court that happened to be bustling at the time because I was here on Thursday afternoon, which for some people is the time that they have lunch, but for me it was the time that I have psychotherapy. As I walked through the food court several times during my session, I realized that I had been too harsh. There were several stalls that were busy and looking quite fresh, and it was clear that many people around me were enjoying their lunch. They clearly did not think they were consuming their meals in a straight garbage environment. So I apologize to you, JV Mall, and I also apologize for taking advantage of the key that I held to the Walden Books, the details of which will be held back for a book. But let's say that when you give a teenager a key to the mall bookstore, whatever happens in the literature section stays in the literature section until you write about it later in life. P.S. In a show of dork solidarity, a woman whom I saw earlier at the Panera doing the Sip Club Wi-Fi thing is also here doing the mall walk thing. When we passed for the second time on the steps, I stopped and said, "Didn't I just see you at the Panera?" She said yes, and I replied that I guess we both do the Panera/mall walk circuit. She laughed and we both walked away. Don't forget, if you want to watch the daily posts that comprise this weekly podcast in real time, you can do so on YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok if you're nasty. All of the links to my social media can be found at superjews.com. That's superjews.com. You can also watch on Substack, which is a platform where I post these videos, but is also where all of my long-form writing lives, including the illustrated posts that accompany the Josh Bloom podcast. Substack is a platform by which writers can publish writing, which is then emailed as a beautiful, convenient newsletter to subscribers like you. So when you hear me say, subscribe to my Substack, that means go to superjews.substack.com and enter your email address. You may also choose to support me with a paid subscription. Thank you in advance. And now, let's get into 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration, days 334 through 340. This week on the show, on day 334, I reflect on dudes who outfit their oversized pickups with truck nuts, an appropriate accessory considering the mental state of the vehicle's driver. These thoughts were brought about after the murder of Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis at the hands of a dude who didn't get daddy's love. Don't worry, I still believe that humans are compassionate, empathetic, and dedicated to prosperity for all. That said, some people are like a bad food court. Straight garbage. On day 335, I am contemplating the song Changes by David Bowie on the anniversary of his passing. I wonder what it takes to change and how change is the only way I know to keep what has happened in Minneapolis from happening throughout the nation. I acknowledge that change is one of, if not the most, difficult challenges any person can face, especially when it may mean losing friends, family, or even your own identity. If David Bowie could do it, I think I can too. On day 336, we celebrate making it to 23% of 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration. I happen to be at the beloved Black Cow Coffee Company on this day, an environment where awesome people are not willing to sacrifice mindfulness, optimism, and hope just because the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration seem to thrive on making people's lives miserable. I also mention the Jim Carrey film, The Number 23, for no reason at all other than the title. On day 337, I am still thinking about Minneapolis. Of course, my thoughts drift to Prince Rogers Nelson, also known as Prince. I opine about what sexy words he might say about his city today. Frankly, I am sadly satisfied by the idea that he didn't live long enough to see the shambles. I guess I am glad that the perpetrators of the ruinous behavior we have seen in the city will never be able to appreciate or enjoy the brilliance of Prince or any art or artists. You have to have a heart to connect with art. On day 338, I contemplate how truly screwed we are, but screwed in a good way. What I mean is that we are going to have to collectively figure out what to do with ourselves once we survive the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration, which we will do. Sometimes it feels like there is an assault on our way of seeing the world, but we are learning from the experience, and it will make us all better able to connect with each other on the other side. Maybe. Day 339 falls on the 1-year anniversary of my first post in this series. I leave it to you to do the math because I am not good at math, even though I probably would be if I applied myself or cared. I leave that kind of discipline to leaders such as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose life we celebrate on this day of the year. I recount a personal story of racism in my neighborhood, not to undermine the positive message, but to remind that to find bigotry, we actually have to look for it. And I am glad that bigotry and math still does not feel like it is looking for me. On day 340, I get a little frustrated as the media continues to not quite get it when it comes to reporting about the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration. I believe there is no governance going on here. There is simply the use of the levers of governance to enact grievance. If the media reports on what appears to be this very simple fact, then they will not have anything else to report on, however, and reporting is a daily endeavor that makes big money. I get it, but I'm going to keep pointing it out. Here's some breaking news of my own. I am back at home, and I am going to check and see if my toaster oven has completed cooking my frozen French fries. I will be back shortly. Enjoy!
Day 334 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. Renee Nicole Good should never have had to deal with an armed bully on an ego trip. The leader of the Trump administration, and their supporters who try to justify the victimization of Renee Nicole Good are not open to seeing the physical world as any different from the world they see in their medium-sized minds. You do what I say, and if you don't do what I say, then everything that happens after that is your fault. That is what bullies, abusers, and dudes with truck nuts see in their head movie. All of recorded human history includes this type of person. Substitute historical truck nut equivalents. I remind myself that most people, including people we don't agree with, still believe in the value of compassion, the value of empathy, the value in helping others prosper, because that means everyone prospers. This is what I say to myself when I feel despair, like I have felt despair for the last 24 hours. Most people do not believe the way to prosper is to ruin everyone around you who doesn't agree with you. But for those people, prosper has a different definition. The medium-sized mind is not only medium, it is malignant, it maligns, and it is messed the fuck up. These types of people end up eating themselves eventually until the next generation. When the people in their vicinity abandon them because they are tired of being abused, they have no one left to crush but each other. We have to be more vigilant than ever about protecting our peace through mindfulness, optimism, and hope, because these nefarious forces, while in the minority, currently have the majority of power to feed their darkest impulses with impunity. And their impulse is to hurt us. Renee Nicole Good might be alive right now if she had had a moment to say to herself, oh, I'm dealing with fucking bullies on a fucking ego trip who are not fucking qualified to be carrying fucking weapons, much less giving me fucking orders. But she didn't have the time to think that. She tried to get out of the way, but bullies don't let you get out of the way. They want you in the way. How else can they punish you for not seeing the world in the way that they say? Unfortunately, these crimes will continue until this wave of human inequity has run its course. We are currently in the throes of its crash. It is our generation's turn in a turbulent timeline of polarization. Stay mindful, optimistic, and hopeful, and continue to ignore the Trump administration. Day 335 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. What does it take to change? Coincidentally, David Bowie, famous for many iconic songs, including one called Changes, passed away on January 10th, and so it is fitting for me to be thinking today about change. Today is not about the details for me of what happened in Minneapolis. I have seen too many details. So many that I have to step away from details. I have to step into what the details tell me about myself and what the details tell me about the world around me and the people in it. Gratefully, when I'm out in the tiny fragment of the world that is my neighborhood, I do not see the distress, the pain, and the anger I see online. And more importantly, I do not see what I saw in a tiny fragment of a neighborhood in Minnesota where horrific acts took place that have quickly influenced the entire world. But if it can happen there, it can happen here, and the only way to keep that from happening is through change. Change is one of the most difficult challenges a human being can try to accomplish, but changing one's thinking is immeasurably consequential. That initial switch to begin wondering if the way you see the world is inaccurate is important, but even more important is feeling like you don't want to see the world the way you are seeing it anymore. This change can cost friends, this can cost family, this can cost a person's own sanity for the time that they are immersing themselves in allowing new ideas to take root. Turning away from ideology that defines your friends, family, and even your own identity can seem impossible, especially after a lifetime of training oneself to seek validation for these ideas. With what happened in Minneapolis this week, there is no turning back for those who are not willing to ever turn back because they see the world in a way that is accurate to them. They seek validation for that inaccuracy, and they seek to discredit any ideas to the contrary. But for those who might be just a scratch under the surface, feeling like enough is enough, I hope for them to survive through those initial phases of change, because those phases are worth surviving to experience a more loving, accepting, and encouraging form of validation. For now, I'll be ignoring the Trump administration. Day 336 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. We did it. We made it to 23% of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. Are you okay? Are we doing okay? Well, listen, if you have heard the news, then you might be feeling some blues, but we might be able to do something about that if we choose. I'm saying this out loud as much for myself as for anyone else. I spent most of the morning at the Black Cow Coffee Company in Croton, New York, a Black-owned, openly inclusive coffee shop in my town that feels genuinely safe to be in. And the reason I point out these facts about this fine establishment so clearly and proudly is because not only is this fine establishment chill as fuck, but it is a safe environment where a diverse clientele does not seem stressed, worried, or concerned. More importantly, it feels like an environment where awesome people are not willing to sacrifice mindfulness, optimism, and hope just because the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration seem to thrive on making people's lives miserable. Despite those efforts, I feel like we are thriving. Have you ever seen the movie The Number 23 starring Jim Carrey? It's one of his attempts at dark drama. I haven't seen it either, but hey, it's a convenient cultural reference for today. I prefer Dumb and Dumber myself. But anyway, when we get to these milestones, I like to use the day to remind myself to stay mindful, hopeful, and optimistic about the future, and to renew my resolve to take in less of the constant barrage of information that I see as ceaseless and often useless when it comes to enriching my life. My goal is to reclaim that time and regain my mind, and to use that energy and use those resources to create, to lift up anyone around me who wants someone to talk to, and to look around at what is important, what is really happening in my life. I see the majority of people in my periphery are good people, even those I disagree with. And frankly, I feel as if interacting and connecting with people I disagree with helps me understand the world better. Maybe I will watch that Jim Carrey movie as a 23% celebration. Let me know if you watch it too, and if you're ignoring the Trump administration. Day 337 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. 2028 party over. Oops, out of time. But tonight I'm going to party like it's 2029, which is when we will have new leadership. Day 338 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. We're screwed. And that's a good thing. I bet you're wondering, how can that be a good thing, Josh, unless you are being literal with that word, which always is a good thing if the person fulfills your fantasy. I don't mean it literally. What I mean, and why I mean it's a good thing, is because we are going to have to find out what to do with ourselves once we survive the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration, which we will do. If you are paying any attention, which you shouldn't be, you will see that this situation in regard to the administration is spiraling in a way we have not seen before. I know we hear all the time about walls closing in, a very cinematic image to be sure, but there are no walls that are actually closing in because walls don't move unless, of course, you take a crane and knock down the entire East Wing. But that's for another day. Today, there are no walls closing in. It is simply the lights going dim. And when they do, and we begin to emerge from what feels in some way like a second pandemic, we will have to find out what it is we need to be doing with ourselves and our lives. So I am here to say that this is something I have been thinking about because there is a brighter day ahead. And in that brighter day, I want to bask. I want to take advantage of every opportunity that is afforded me as a mindful, optimistic, and hopeful person going into the future beyond what I have learned, understood, and persevered through over this challenging and continuing period of time. And I want that for you and for everyone who matters to me. I'm sure you do too. It might feel like there is an assault on our way of seeing the world and our understanding of our existence, but I believe and I live in the belief that these feelings are meant to make us better, meant to make us more appreciative, meant to make us more connected with each other. It is also meant to help me see what life can really mean after experiencing so much that was unexpected. It's okay to feel screwed. Sometimes there is a day on the way when this word will be more associated again with sexualization. For now, I'm continuing to live in the idealistic world of John and Yoko's double fantasy, and I'm continuing to ignore the Trump administration. Day 339 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. It is 1 year since I made my first post in the 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration series. Now, I know that I just said today is day 339 and there are 365 days in the year, but I took a few days off in between some of these posts because even though I am very disciplined, I am not exceedingly disciplined. I leave that kind of discipline to leaders such as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was disciplined enough to bring a message to the world during the Civil Rights Movement that the world needed to hear. A message regarding the truth of how this country was founded and the underbelly that still exists in it. An underbelly that holds up corrupt values, ethics, and morals that do not comport with a society that I want to live in. An equal society, a loving society, and an accountable society. I remember a day when I went to the hospital to get some routine x-rays. I was standing at the counter taking care of business when two receptionists were conferring about a date for me to come back and pick up my files. One woman said, "Oh, we won't be here on Monday." The other woman asked, "Why?" And the first woman replied, "It's the Martin Luther King Day holiday." The response to that was simply, "Ew." I remember thinking I must have misheard. I didn't. At that point in my life, I suppose I hadn't been as exposed to outward racism as I thought because that moment stuck with me, and that's why I'm mentioning it today on day 339 of 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration, which happens to coincide with the Martin Luther King Day holiday. Last year, this day also coincided with Inauguration Day, and I have a feeling that the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration would love to wipe out this holiday entirely if they could. I also think they know it would be an incredibly unpopular move, so we'll see what happens in the years to come, but I am sure that behind the scenes there are still a few people just like that woman at the hospital who say ooh, and those are the kind of people I don't want shaping an ideal nation. So that's why I'm ignoring the Trump administration. Day 340 of 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. I don't hear enough people in the mainstream media calling lunacy what it actually is. Lunacy. One of the reasons I've had to step back from podcasters I once relied on, like the Pod Save America boys or Tim Miller at the Bulwark, although I do still check in occasionally because I enjoy their voices, is because I find myself quickly shutting them off when they don't call out the mania for what it is. Mania. Just today, I heard a serious conversation about the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration having a strategy meeting and what their strategy might be. There is no strategy when it comes to the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration. He has intentionally gathered around him people who will lead with anger, fear, and grievance. That is the strategy. The strategy is impulsive behavior rooted in reaction. There is no governance going on here. There is simply the use of the levers of governance to enact grievance. I know it might seem counterintuitive to criticize these left leaning news sources, but the reason I do it is because if they were to simply call out the overriding reason for the decision making, they would have to come on every day and be like, yeah, these are profoundly unwell people enacting their will on the population. And that's all there is to it. But they can't do that because they have to have something to talk about every day. And why? Because the people doing the reporting are also rich. They're not billionaires or worth hundreds of millions of dollars, so they think that that fact alone places them on the correct side of moral history. Well, we're not like that. I feel like many of these people are good-hearted, but once you're living a rich person life, it becomes very hard to imagine stepping away from it. They want to keep collecting fat checks, and that reality shapes what they're willing to talk about. That's what gives rise to grocery stores like Erewhon. The only reason Erewhon exists is to put the same shit on the shelves that exist at every other grocery store and charge 10 times as much for it so rich people can shop there as a flex. It quietly says, I shop here because I can and you can't. I keep that in mind when I occasionally indulge these sources of information, but for the most part, because of the money, I choose to ignore them, just like I ignore the Trump administration.
Hi, it's me. The fries were fine, and I am back at the Panera. I feel like a voyeur here at the P, or maybe I should rename it the PDA, because there is a young couple in the corner making out. It is 12:48 in the afternoon on a Saturday, in case you thought this was a late-night jam. When I say they are making out, I will elaborate by explaining that when I first noticed, I wasn't sure I was seeing what I was seeing. Then I thought, there are kids watching, and then I, of course, made it about me and felt jealous, which was the final straw that I needed to sip from my drink of despair. These were people who were heavy into public indecency, and I was both disgusted by their desecration of the P and disgusted that it wasn't me. It could be, though. I have arguably done worse, as I have alluded to. Thanks again for listening. Please leave a 5-star rating for the 1,461 Days of Ignoring with Josh Bloom podcast in your podcast app, and leave a comment saying that you like the show. If you feel like leaving mean comments about the leader of the Trump administration and how he is a pretend president, you go right ahead and do that. Please tell a politically curious friend about the show, and while you are at it, please follow me on all of my social media by going to superjews.com, that's superjews.com, where you will find the links that you are looking for. Lastly, if you would like to throw some support to me and the show, please subscribe to my Substack, which is a platform where I post my writing and send it directly to your email inbox. Go to superjews.substack.com and just enter your email address. You will be pleased that you did. You can also buy me a coffee. For a mere $3, you will earn my undying gratitude, or at least enough gratitude to last until the next time I ask you to buy me a coffee. Go to buymeacoffee.com/Josh Bloom. Please do not forget what this show is for. We are living in trying times that are trying to take our time away from living. The goal with this show, beyond entertainment, is to reclaim that time, regain our minds, and focus on what is important. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. I am glad you are here every week with me. See you next time. Bye.